Ruben, would you look outside to see if there's anybody else we can grab? See how shy I am? I drafted poor Ruben. He was standing there doing nothing, and now he's working for us. And for our IT guys, I'm going to start from right here. In 5. One, 30, and 1,000. One, 30, and 1,000. One decision. 30 seconds. And that 30 seconds changed 1,000 lives. It was one of those wonderful nights. Young police officer started his shift. He was out riding around, and it was terribly quiet. Now, for a young police officer, a quiet shift is a boring night. They want excitement. They want the sirens. They want to run. They want to have all these great things. But not tonight. Tonight was kind of quiet. Riding around, writing a few tickets, doing a few fun things, stopping at the local donut place. That's a dirty lie. We do not eat donuts. But this officer was out, his shift. When you hear a story, you know how the stories always start about with it was a dark and stormy night. A ship appeared on the horizon. No, different story. But this story talks about this officer in the start of his shift. It was quiet. It was beautiful. It was calm. It was a clear night. It was 3 to 11 shift, very active shift. But during this 3 to 11 shift, this officer was riding around, and then all of a sudden, the silence was broken. Dispatch, car 42BE, 1046, personal injury accident. Be advised, auto versus train. Now, as soon as he got that call, the blood pressure starts up. The mind starts moving. It's the first train accident he'd ever been to. As the officer got that excitement, he's got his blue lights on now. Oh, yeah, and he's got the siren wailing, and he's cutting through traffic. And as he's driving through the traffic, he's thinking to himself, he says, I've got to do certain things. I've got to follow the book. I've got to close the highway. I've got to render aid to any victims that might be present. I've got to make sure that the scene doesn't get work. Oh, I've got to notify the railroad. I've got to. And as he's racing toward the scene, his mind is running at 1,000 miles a minute. He runs to the intersection, and just before he gets there, the dispatcher says, be advised, train crew is on the scene. They're reporting this is a serious injury. Fire, EMS, emergency medical is now responding. The officer was there within just a matter of a few minutes. He parks his car. He very carefully put his car sideways on the road, make sure that things didn't get worse. He very meticulously broke out his flares, his traffic cones. And then as he stepped out of his vehicle, he noticed with his spotlight 2 red flashing lights. The signals were functioning. The red flashing lights were bouncing off the side of the freight train that was now blocking the crossing. He took his flashlight and he peered down the track, and he looked and he sees a sedan, an automobile, on its side, positioned down the track. The officer quickly says, okay, grab my medical kit, got to run over there. He goes over there. He sees this older gentleman. To him, it was older. The guy was probably about 40. But he sees him kneeling down beside an injured victim. The officer quickly does an assessment, says, sir, who are you? And the guy says, hey, I'm the train conductor. My engineer currently has the train locked down and blocked. The engineer is still on the engine. The engineer now had given me some information. The conductor had told the officer that the train was not going to move, that the railroad had been notified, so those are two things that were now off his checklist. He starts turning his immediate attention now to the victim. There's a victim laying there. It's a young girl. She's laying beside the railroad track. The officer quickly bends down, checks for a pulse. There was none. The traumatic injuries were fairly obvious that this was not going to be a survivable incident. The officer quickly gets on the radio and says, notify EMS, expedite. That means get here quick. But the officer realizes in that moment that he is now on the scene of his first train crash with his first fatality. As the crew, the conductor, starts relaying information, the conductor looks and he said, there's nothing I could do. The engineer went into a full emergency. We saw it coming. There was nothing I can do. It's not our fault. He watched the tears start to develop in this older man's eyes. The pain, the hurt was very obvious. The officer started looking. To be honest, he was looking around going, where is that ambulance? And within just a matter of a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity, the fire department pulls up the EMS. They grab their bags, they come charging over. The first paramedic kneels down, breaks out the testing equipment, the AED, and puts on the pads. There's no sign of life. The chief does a quick critical assessment and says, no. The officer watched the firefighters, seasoned veterans. He knew them all. He'd been to calls with them. He watched the firefighters as their mood suddenly went from, yeah, we're here, we're going to save the day, to there's nothing we can do. See, these firefighters, their job is to run to help people. Their job is to be there to save lives. It is not in their makeup to say, there's nothing we can do. The officer continued. One of the firefighters brought out a blue sheet, carefully covered up with the victim, took some of the ballast from the side of the rail and weighted it down. The officer kicked into his processes. He ordered up ID units to take the photos, the videos, because we wanted to make sure that he documented this incident scene very carefully. At that point, the officer said, well, I need to interview the engineer. Told the conductor, would you walk me down to the engine? I'd like to speak to the engineer. The officer walked down the ballast bed, walked along the side rail, followed the conductor, carefully mounted the train, went up the ladder. As the officer mounted the train, he entered into the cabin, opened up the side door of the engine. The engine was still running. Had to keep the air on the cars, keep the brakes locked down. But the engineer, the train driver, was still in his seat. The train driver was sitting there. Trains have something called a reverser. Is that the correct term? There's this little pin that you put in, and that's what makes the train go forward and backwards. And the engineer had the reverser in his hand, much like the microphone. As the officer stepped onto the engine, one of the things that he noticed is that the engineer was sitting there with the reverser in his hand, and it looked something like this. He was trembling. He looked at the engineer, looked at the officer. And as he looked at the officer, he very quickly looked at, had this panicked look. He goes, "Please tell me, is she going to be okay?" As soon as the officer delivered the message that fire and EMS were with the victim and were working with her and doing all they could, the engineer knew. He could tell. The mindset. The officer watched this burly, big man put his head down and go to tears. As the officer continued his investigation processes, there were several steps that had to be made. We had to find out exactly what happened. We had to interview. There were no witnesses except for the engineer, conductor. The engineer started the train up. They separated the cars so they could work both sides of the track, separated the train, locked down the cars, did all those things that need to be done. And the officer noticed some things that he hadn't yet seen. He noticed, first off, that the signals were working perfectly. They were doing their job. The crossbucks were there. The signals were flashing. The markings on the road were correct. The officer made sure he took good pictures of that. He looked across and he noticed that there were 3 sets of tracks. He also noticed that on one of the other tracks just down from the crossing was another train sitting there. This was what they call a crew change area. The engineer had, of that train, was in the process of changing out their crew. So that engine had been stopped short of the crossing. For those of you who understand trains, you know what I'm going to tell you next. One decision. The young lady was very close to home, as a matter of fact. She traveled that road every day. She knew that crossing like the back of her hand. She could probably drive it blindfolded. She was driving down the road. She came up on the crossing. She saw the lights, ding, 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 ding. She heard the sound. She had her window down. No noise, no nothing. Nothing to stop her from hearing the blaring whistle. The engineer was on the horn. From his description, he was sitting on it. What had happened, the victim pulled up at the track, did the assessment. The train is stopped. The lights are off. I can go now. She sat there for maybe 30 seconds. And she moved across the track. And on track number 2, was the freight train moving at full speed. The impact was devastating. It quickly spun the car around, bounced it off to the right-of-way. The front windshield was torn out. The victim was ejected out the front of the car. Her head impacted one of the steel rails, and that ended her life that night. Unfortunately, the hardest part of the job had not yet been done. This young lady has family. That officer had to go to the house listed on the driver's license, knock on the door. The officer stated his name, and he said, "I need to talk to you. It's about your daughter." Daddy met him at the door and said, "She's late. I'm going to blah, blah, blah," words that he probably quickly regretted. Mama came down the stairs. She had just tucked in their youngest son. And as the youngest son saw the police car down out front and saw the officer in the living room, naturally he came bouncing down the stairs. And that officer had to stop. Asked the father, said, "Can I talk to you alone for a minute?" That officer went, talked to that father, and said, "Your daughter's not coming home." Mother heard it. Mother started to cry. The wailing, the tears, you can't imagine. But the hardest part wasn't over yet. The hardest part was when the officer kneeled down and told the son, "Your sister's not coming home." In the South, they say, "Gone home to be in heaven." I'm not sorry for being emotional. That officer was beat. It hurt my heart. I couldn't do anything. It's not why I took this job. So let me tell you what I did. I joined OLI. I went to grade crossing safety. I went and became an advocate for grade crossing safety. I talked to people. I spread the message. And you know what's funny? Look where I'm at today. I'm standing in front of a bunch of my peers crying like a baby. It's 30 years ago. I still remember. I would invite you all to come to my office in D.C. In that office in D.C., in a little blue folder, there's a photograph. Rachel's seen it. Jeff has seen it. And it's the picture of long, flowing blonde hair sticking out from underneath the blue blanket. I don't want to forget. And if you can tell, I never will. I've told this story. I've never once not shed a tear. But the reason I tell this story is because it changed me, and I want it to change you. Many of you in this room have that story. You have these incidents. You've been there to these scenes. We've got there. We've got to stop it. Why are we here today? What is the purpose of this entire ILCAD 3-day special? No, it's not all the wonderful food. No, it's not all of the wonderful friendship and the handshakes. It is about that one victim. I don't want them to be another one, but I know there's going to be. I've told that story several times. I've counted that it's probably been about 1,000 people that have sat and listened to it. Subsequently, the night that changed 1,000 lives. Tonight, I hope it's new title to my story is the night that changed 1,200 lives. Do me a favor. Stand with me for 1 minute. Let's remember the victims. Thank you. All right. I also have the privilege of being the moderator of this session. We'll hold questions to the end, but I don't think there'll be many on that one. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker. Charlie has been a absolute wonderful person to work with. Charlie has worked on a project that is near and dear to me. The Operation Lifesaver developed a very special program, and that program was designed, developed, and built with one purpose, and that was to train our first responders on what to do when they get on the scene. So, Charlie, I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm just going to turn the mic over to you. Charlie Matheson.
So, thank you for having me this afternoon and allowing me to speak about the Operation Lifesaver Railroad Investigation Safety course. As Andy stated, this course was developed in part to educate our law enforcement partners about the critical safety needs that they need to be aware of when they're called upon an incident, and making sure that they can safely and effectively investigate these incidents and also prevent track tragedies. So the Railroad Investigation Safety course, also identified as RIS, is our course that was developed with our Operation Lifesaver, FRA, AAR, our Class 1 partners, and various rail safety experts to, again, educate our law enforcement partners about the safety and necessity of keeping them safe around railroad tracks. Unfortunately, as we all know, being here, that approximately every 3 hours there's an incident involving a train. As such, we call on our law enforcement officers for assistance to investigate these incidents. And while these incidents become complex and require various different aspects of interviewing, investigating, and dealing with the situation, there's unique challenges that face the law enforcement officers, and we want to make sure that they are safe in regards to safely responding to the incident and also effectively investigating the incident to provide our safety partners, such as the FRA, DOT, FARs within the states, to making sure how do we prevent these incidents from occurring and documenting those incidents properly. Also, the biggest important part of this course is that since 1877, more than 200 officers have died as a result of a collision involving a train. So the goal and the purpose of this program is to ensure that that number does not increase at all. So we want to make sure that our law enforcement partners, our first responders, when they respond, they know exactly what to do and how to effectively investigate those incidents so that number does not go up. So the RIS itself is developed in 4 different modules. Module 1 being Rail Safety 101. It's the key components of rail safety for our responders. Module 2 being on-scene safety and situational awareness. Module 3, rail resources and initial reporting. And Module 4, rail incident conclusion. How do we wrap up the incident and continue with making sure we don't have these incidents continuing or occur. So Module 1, Risk 101. It's talking about the rail safety issues and the safety issues as the railroad environment itself. Making sure the officers understand what the challenges are that they're potentially going to, and being aware of those safety issues. Signs and signals. The big thing that we teach our officers is the ENS information. It's surprising the number of officers who are not aware of the blue and white ENS signs that are located at every crossing. So we make sure that every time we go to a class and we instruct this Class 2 law enforcement partners, they're fully aware of the blue and white sign, the information that's contained, and how that can help them making sure that they make proper notification of the railroads of incidents either at the crossing or when they're investigating incidents that's not involving the railroad but near railroad tracks itself. Okay? Developing advanced preparation, so making sure they're contacting the railroads, looking at what facilities are within their cities and towns and what operations are occurring in regards to also what crossings go through their community, and making sure that understanding who is operating and what other aspects of challenges such as tunnels, bridges, and other various challenges within the railroad operations itself. And then also developing those railroad contacts, not just going there when an incident occurs, but again, as a part of the advanced preparation is reaching out to those railroad operations and seeing who they are, going out to the facilities, understanding what type of operations are occurring, such as flat switching, hump operations, intermodal, what type of commodity is coming to that rail facility, and understanding what they may potentially deal with if there is an incident. On-scene safety, so we talked to officers about as far as if and when they are called to an incident, understanding what questions they need to ask. Are they dealing with the freight train? Is there hazardous material involved? Is the material leaking from the train or the motor vehicle? Is it involving multiple trains? Is it involving a passenger train? Getting those initial information to making sure they can properly allocate resources to that scene. Also, we all know as rail safety professionals that when there's an incident, more times than none, the impact may have occurred at the crossing, but the incident itself may not be at the exact location of impact and maybe further down the tracks, and making sure how they identify all that information. And then while on scene, ensuring their safety. We had an incident involving where a local police department was called to a motor vehicle crash at a crossing. The officers arrived, began rendering aid. Lo and behold, they started working and trying to rescue the victims out of, or the occupants out of the vehicle, at which point the train started moving. No one had notified the railroad, and the railroad was not aware that an impact actually had occurred, at which point the train started moving. And so we talk about that aspect and making sure that just because you're called there, don't assume the railroad knows. Making sure that you notify the railroad and they're aware that an incident has occurred. And then key safety points to live by as far as making sure that they're aware of the hazards, again, of the tripping hazards. Making sure that they're aware that there's multiple trains that can be operated within that crossings, and then looking for that inverted T, again, ensuring proper notification has been made to the respective railroads. Module 3 is rail resources, and this is where we talk about the resources that's available to them, such as Operation Lifesaver, FRA, AAR, Chemtrek, okay? Various applications that are available also that the officers can use, such as the FRA's Rail Locator app that can help them identify crossings if they're not aware or they can't find the blue ENS sign, okay? Getting familiar with rail equipment that's involved in railroad operations, and train documents, and what that train documents as far as information that provides to them, and so that way they can make an assessment of how to manage that incident itself, okay? Railroad personnel and equipment that's also available as far as who they may encounter during an incident, such as the locomotive engineer, conductor, train supervisors, train dispatchers, signal maintainers, so different personnel that's available to help them with their investigation. And then crimes against the railroad, talking about trespassing and why that's an issue for not only for the railroad, but as a community. As Andy stated in his story, it makes an impact not only for the railroad, but the community, and the officers may directly or indirectly may know somebody that's involved in an incident, and then educating them about the various laws that's associated with the railroads, as far as vandalisms and why we need to make sure that we're keeping people off the tracks, trespassing issues, and other theft issues along with the railroad itself. And again, as I talked about, safety partners with the FRA, AAR, and other resources that's available to them. And then Module 4 is the conclusion, is talking, making sure we take the proper steps to finish up the investigation and the scene is clear. And when there's an incident, obviously there's going to be law enforcement, first responders, as far as firefighters, EMS, possibly medical examiner, and different trained personnel that's on scene. And with them, we want to make sure that everyone is accounted for before we start releasing a train. Unfortunately, when there isn't a fatality, on average, the train block or the crossing incident takes about 3 hours to investigate. And we tell the officers that we want to try to mitigate and investigate everything as quickly as possible so we can get the trains moving. And when they look at us and they say, well, I'm going to take a thorough and in-depth time investigating that incident, and it doesn't really matter to me how long that train sits there. And we say, yes, we want you to do a proper investigation and do a great job. But at the same time, unlike a motor vehicle accident, when there is a crash, you can reroute motor vehicles in a minute's notice. However, with freight trains, you can't do that, right? So a large city like Denver, they may not have an impact on the city itself, but in large or small rural communities, a community may be split entirely by train tracks from north and south. So it's going to have an impact in regards to services as far as police, fire, EMS, when school's in session, school buses, and the community will be impacted. So we tell them, hey, it's important to make sure that you do a thorough job, but at the same time, we want to make sure we get the trains moving so the other communities behind or ahead of that train isn't blocking the community and affecting the quality of life of everybody else. Okay. Also, documentation of the proper state crash reports or incident reports, making sure, again, the state DOTs get that proper documentation to understand what happened, why that incident occurred, and making sure what we can do is try to prevent another incident from occurring. And then support from prosecution for crimes against the railroad, human behavior as far as driving around gates, trespassing issues, working with the state's attorneys, prosecutors to making sure that when we are out enforcing various crimes against the railroad, that we are having follow-up and making sure we get support from the state coordinators and the prosecutor's office to make sure that we get what we need to get done. And again, partnership with Operation Lifesaver and the FRA to continue that positive trend of trying to reduce incidents. So the success of RIS itself, RIS was launched in the third quarter of 2020 when it was initially launched. In that year, in the third quarter, we had approximately 36 classes with 550 people in attendance. In 2021, we had approximately 170 classes with approximately 2,800 people in attendance. In 2022 so far, and this is up stats from as of April, 47 classes, over 800 people in attendance. And in total, since the launch of this program, we've had over 250 classes conducted in person and virtually, and approximately 4,200 people in attendance for our classes. Currently, we have approximately 200 instructors that are certified throughout the country teaching RIS to our law enforcement safety partners to keeping them safe, 29 instructor trainers that are certified to train additional instructors and having that outreach to the community. And then we have 4 master instructors who are train our instructor trainers. There's a highlight of some pictures of classes that we conducted throughout the country. We've conducted both in-person and virtual. We've adapted based on what's happened in the world recently. And our big thing that we are really focusing on with RIS is the accreditation. Currently, RIS is certified in 16 states by the respective post or police officers' certification process. So whenever an officer attends a RIS course, they receive in-service hours or continuing education credits for their law enforcement certification. Our goal with our partners is to get RIS accredited in all 50 states to making sure that this is applied not only as an in-service education, but we're working currently in Indiana, which is my home state, is that this is a part of their regular curriculum in their police academy as part of their 600 hours of training. Just recently, we've worked with CSX Police, the CN Police, and we have our program statewide now in Indiana, and then also working with the CN and CSX, we just got the RIS program accredited into the Chicago Police Department. So going forward, Chicago Police Department recruits will be receiving RIS as part of their curriculum as their academy training. The next thing I'm going to show you guys is a video of the success story of RIS. More times than none, we show things that have a negative impact or things that shouldn't have happened or lessons learned. This video I'm particularly proud of in the sense that this officer that we retrieved this body camera footage actually attended my GCCI class 10 years ago. And when he called me when this incident happened, he said, "Your training kicked in and I knew what to do." So I want to show you guys this video and just kind of give you a backstory. The officer was called by a resident because they saw somebody trespassing on the railroad tracks. That's usually not a normal thing in that area. And he responded, and the video will kind of play for itself, and you guys can see.
Shit. He's laying on the tracks. There's a train coming. I'm trying to get to him. Dude, get up! There's a train! Get up! Get up! Get man. Come on. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Holy shit. Turn around. Turn around now. Turn around. Get on your knees. Dispatch, I got him. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
So the highlight of that video is that this officer realized that there was possibly going to be an impact that may occur. And what we teach our officers is that while we do our best to try to prevent and help and save people, but there's sometimes we may not be able to. And with that, we tell them making sure that they stay off the railroad tracks themselves and they don't become part of that incident. And what this officer did is exactly what he's trained to do, is he stayed off the gauge, off the railroad tracks, off to the side, and realizing that there may be a potential impact, ducked off to the side and tried to get cover in the event that the impact would have occurred. So again, this is the stuff that we want to continue to see, and what's great about the RISK program is that it's never going to be completed. And the reason I say that is that as these incidents occur, we're able to show police officers the success and what we need them to do and how things have changed. And every time there's an incident, there's talking points that we will provide to our officers and continue to update our RISK program. So with that, and I think everyone has said this, is that together, all of us, doesn't matter if it's law enforcement, our volunteers, our federal partners, our international partners, together we can stop track tragedies. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. As I said, I had a great privilege of working with Charlie and his team, an amazing group of professionals that put this program together, and I'm highly pleased with the outcome. So, we're down to the last Q&A session. Now's your chance. Any questions for Charlie and I? Miss Rachel, I'll just hand you my mic.
It's not so much a question as I just want to let everyone know, I don't think we heard, Charlie is a law enforcement officer, and all our instructors are law enforcement. So we have police officers talking to police officers. We actually have a couple of our master and trainers and instructors right here in the room with us. So if you want to raise your hands, JP, Sean, Alan.
Rick.
So, you know, so, but they're not mad. But also, we're in the process of creating a module for firefighters as well, specific for firefighters, and that will be taught by firefighters to firefighters. So we know that if I walked into a room with police officers, they wouldn't listen to me. So not a chance, exactly, right? But we heard that, and that's how we modeled the program. So thank you to Charlie and all the law enforcement officers who are in this room who have participated in the program to help us share the rail safety message.
I believe there's a question in the back.
Microphone is moving. She's got to work twice as hard because I have the other mic.
Thank you. Hey, I just wanted a comment and then a question for follow-up. So, you know, you saw in that video where he calls back in and radios back into dispatch. Dispatch obviously had not called the railroad. We find that happens a lot, that, or if they tell them, they're relying on dispatch to call the radio or to call the railroad, and they will say, we did. I've had one incident where they called the wrong railroad, and so I have police officers walking around there, and thankfully we then got notified in a different manner and were able to do something. But it's hard to get to the dispatchers. They are working short-staffed. They are working mandatory overtime. They just don't have the time to come sit in a class. But they are going to be your first-line people to call the railroad to get train traffic stopped. Do you have a module for them, or are you working on one for them as well, so that they know to ask that question when the public calls in before they even dispatch an officer out? Are they asking, what does the blue sign say? Can you tell me what phone number is on there? Can you give me the crossing ID? How are they getting that information to protect their officers when they're being dispatched to that scene?
So that's a great question, yes. And our future goal is actually to develop a dispatcher module for risk. So that way we can provide them with the initial protocols and steps of making sure that they're making proper notification as well. Right now, with this program, we're instructing our officers to make sure that they're aware of their location and they're telling their dispatcher as far as making sure train traffic is stopped, and or if they're not able to relay that information to their dispatcher using the FRA Rail Locator app or directly calling the railroad that's operating those tracks and them themselves providing first line direct communication to the railroad to say, I'm Officer Smith or whoever it may be, I'm out here, I'm investigating this incident, and I need train traffic stopped. So we are teaching that to the officers to try to relay that to dispatchers, and our future goal is to get a module for police dispatchers.
I know you're going to be completely surprised at this. My daughter's a police dispatcher. She's a training and instructor. And one of the very first things I did is I asked her, I said, what is your department? Sumner County, which is just outside of Nashville. I said, what's your department doing about rail safety? Are you aware of the notification signs? And she said, well, we actually have a module. As soon as somebody says train, we start asking a series of questions. So what I did is I worked with them and we actually developed some of the proper questions addressing particularly, do you see a blue sign? Are you near a crossing? Can you give us information? Because I personally have been on the scene of a call or on the radio and I heard officers rail radio say, hey, notify CSX to stop all traffic. Great, that's Nashville and Eastern's rail line. So that is certainly a problem that, as Charlie said, we're addressing in the future, but in Sumner County, they've got a program. Yes, sir.
So I got a question. Gets a little more technical, but it's still something that involves law enforcement, is preemption. And Rick and I have talked about this over many times, but do most police officers understand what a preemption circuit does and how it's meant to turn the lights green so that traffic gets flushed off the crossing? And I'll use this back to my railroad days up in Seattle. You got Safeco Field, baseball game just got done, crossings preempted to the local intersection, and the light's green, but a police officer is standing there holding traffic onto the crossing. And I think that's one area, in my opinion, needs to be really addressed in law enforcement so that they understand it. They may not know what's going on, and so preemption is a big topic from my perspective, and making sure that police officers understand that they're basically overriding a safety device.
I could answer that. So that's unique to every circumstance, and that has to be addressed based on the location, right? And every location is going to provide unique challenges. So we tell their instructors that you need to understand what your area or what the challenges are, and then discuss what those issues are, right? Because that may be an issue for Seattle, but they might not be an issue for a department in southern Indiana or rural Texas, right? So again, when we provide instructions, we tell them you need to focus on how it affects your area of focus of enforcement and understanding what your rules and regulations are. Also, from state to state, we found that there's different regulations and laws in regards to what laws in regards to enforcement and what they can or can't do in regards to railroad industries itself. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Charlie.
Kind of. Okay.
So, yeah, to try and fill in a little bit about this, when we worked on development of the risk modules, we were really focused on the basics and what everybody needs coast to coast, right? So just like Charlie said and Andy, it's trying to keep everybody safe. That's a really specialized topic, and our plan is to have more modules for risk. So just like fire and dispatch, I mean, and as Charlie said, it's an alive kind of presentation. So that particular factor is really focused, but I know a number of us in this room know that that very specific incident led to a multi-fatality crash with a train and a parade a number of years back. And NTSB has even made some very pointed safety recommendations because of that. But it's focused to just certain departments and we're going to have to kind of figure out how to get some of those specialized things into it. But the point's well made. I mean, it's critical. An officer out in the intersection directing traffic probably has no clue as to what's going on with preemption, and we'll get there. Just we got to have some time on that one.
Thank you. Always great to have the professional in the audience. Any more questions? Anybody upstairs? I now see what they were saying. You can stare into the lights. I can't see anything. All right. At this time, this concludes our module. Final module of the day. I would like to turn the microphone over to Director Alan Spence.
Thanks very much, Andy. Personal reflection is I think Charlie had the hardest slot today. Following you. Yes. More of that in a moment. So it's fallen to me to sum up 2 extraordinary days. A conference that shared so much, and I don't just mean technical knowledge. I mean, it shared so much friendship, shared so much engagement, as well as a vast amount of learning. And it's a bit of an auspicious occasion. We're here in ILCAD this year in UIC's centenary and OLI's half centenary. Well, it don't happen very often, does it? And aren't they both amazing organisations? Of everything that they achieve. UIC bringing so many people together across the world, really creating that international railway family. And OLI, it doesn't fall to me to say how good it is. I think you all know. And if nothing else, Andy's talk earlier illustrated just how vital it is. But for the first time this year, we've combined not just level crossing safety, that the core of ILCAD, but that other really important topic of how we tackle trespass and suicide on our railways. Together, those 3 aspects take more lives than anything else. And that huge, appalling toll of death, we've seen lots of numbers, but to be honest, those numbers are worth very little compared to the human stories that underlie every single one of them. And nothing could have told that more clearly than Andy. Thank you, sir. And we know that while other aspects of railway safety are improving, thankfully, unfortunately, trespass and suicide are in many of our railways suffering the other direction of trend. So I'm not going to go through every single one of the presentations that we've had, just very simply to say that the range of speakers, the range of topics that the organising committee have put together, I think have really captured this so well. From the government agencies, FRA, NTSB, from the industry associations, whether that's AAR or Shortlines, and how everybody coming together has made a coherent programme. I want to just perhaps make specific reference to, I think I'm to call him Dr. Wash, because not only was he an extraordinarily engaging speaker, but his link between those who come on the railway to trespass, the adverse trend in derailments caused by vandalism, and the prospect of something as bad as Lac Mégantic happening actually made me chill. And therefore, we shouldn't be regarding dealing with trespass as just preventing the loss of individual lives, albeit sometimes vulnerable young lives. we should see that as well as about protecting against far worse tragedies. I was particularly taken by some of the references to how we make sure that our control measures stay effective. And a number of speakers have illustrated how here in the US, clearly, the whole quiet zone matter is really hot on your agendas. And Carl, I think you raised that first. A number of others have referenced it. We suffer similar issues in the UK with our nighttime quiet period. So we have certain crossings that it's not safe to cross unless the train sounds its horn. We still rely on that Victorian method of control, much to my regret. But we turn that control off between midnight and 6 a.m. because of the interaction with community. Don't forget, as Rob Wainwright said earlier, we're there to serve communities as well as the funders and others who need to use our services. And so there is a conundrum about how we meet both the community need and the safety need of our railway and of those who use crossings. I think that need is only going to be properly met when we can afford, or when we can develop affordable technology that takes us away from something as primitive as a horn or a bell into more active forms of control. I really liked the way that Henry linked quality, safety, and business success, and how we look after our railways, how we project the image of the railway to others is going to influence so many aspects of safety as well as continued business viability. The care that we demonstrate in our infrastructure, that includes our level crossings, has a direct connection, I believe, with how people behave in using them and engaging with our railway. If we leave it looking like rubbish, they're more likely to think it's rubbish. I was also struck by the similarities. Although we may call things by different names, and I'm not just talking about that slightly unusual version of English you use over here, I'm actually thinking about just the differences between countries or indeed different railways, about how we term some of the actions that we're taking. But when you stop and get behind some of the words, we're actually doing very similar things. And ILCAD's a really useful way to bring that together so that we can share the learning. It doesn't matter if we label it differently back home, but surely let's make sure we're not reinventing the wheel. And I think the one that struck me was Henry Conksall, who talked about question, persuade, and refer. Now, in Britain, I would talk about that as small talk saves lives, because that's the name of our campaign. And we were encouraging the general public, the travelling public, if they see someone behaving oddly, see somebody who doesn't catch the next train, waits for 2 or 3 trains to go, see someone who has put their possessions down on the floor beside them, see someone who is looking as if they are completely unfocused on the railway, just simply to go and ask them an isolated question, a seemingly unrelated question or comment. Unusual weather today, isn't it? Brits, we always talk about the weather. Where are you going today? Something like that can be enough to break that ideation of suicide, to bring somebody back out of that bubble they were in and help them to get help. The refer bit of Henry's point. I particularly also liked myth busting. It simply is wrong to assume that you can make the situation worse. If we could hammer that home across the world, wouldn't we save a lot of lives? One of the things that's different about the American industry is the amount of companies involved. I think our industry is complicated. Then I heard here. And yet, I think there was a powerful point made about if we have national controls, and we should have national controls, that actually we still need local solutions. We still need to engage the right people at a local level to make sure that communities feel involved, to make sure that the controls we apply are specific to the location, the level crossing, they're tailored to the risk at that level crossing, and that we engage with the users of that specific crossing. And it's for that reason that the Global Level Crossing Network is developing, and in the latter stages of developing, a guide of best practice, for which I thank all those who've taken part in the questionnaires and the other interviews and discussions that Rob Wainwright has led on best practice in risk assessment at level crossings. That guide will be relatively straightforward. It has, at the current draft, I think 7 key points, and we're hoping that that will help railways to make sure that our controls are appropriate for the crossing and appropriate for that local environment. One of the things I hate is sloppy English, and I'm not going on about the American thing again, but passive language, unengaging language, words that are unnecessary. If we put all of that in our signs, in our brochures, in all the stuff that we pump out trying to influence people, we're only going to add clouds rather than clarity. Let's make sure that we tailor the language we use and the designs we use to be the ones that will really have effect. And I've heard exactly that point made today about getting psychologists to look at the language in our brochures to make sure that we even look at the colours to see those that are going to have the biggest impact. Let's make sure we keep it simple, stupid. And then, of course, OLI, with its history of producing all of that material to help educate. And they're not unique, but boy, are they leading the way. And those have huge impact in influencing future generations. But regardless of what we do through ILCAD and all of the messaging that we give trying to persuade safe use, ultimately, I think we're going to see a massive change in how we manage risk on our railways in the next few years. Cast your minds back 20 years. None of you had a computer in your pocket, and I'm willing to bet every single one of you does today. And it's a computer with greater computing power than was about in the 1960s when you put a man on the moon. So if that can happen in such a short space of time, where are we going in the next 10 or 20 years? And we've had a taster today of some of the technology, whether that's drones, artificial intelligence, connected vehicles, all of those sorts of things are going to radically change our railways. And if we don't embrace them and work with them, then actually we will be the problem. And it's an opportunity for us to improve the effectiveness of our controls. But I will ask one plea, and that's that as we develop new technology, as we get better at managing risk through hardware, through engineering, can we please avoid being frightened of only doing small steps on the way? I've mentioned to one or two over casual conversations during the last day or two about my battles that I have with some engineers. And forgive me, because I know there's one or two engineers in the room. And my experience is that we have put engineers in the place, and I do put it that way, we've put engineers in the place where they are more risk averse than the balance of risk dictates. And what it ends up with, and I speak as personal experience from the British industry, is that we are frightened to do something because there's a tiny chance it might fail. so we don't take that technology step. What that means is we're still stuck with what we had yesterday. And moreover, it's exactly the same as we had in the 19th century in some instances. So let's not be frightened of taking small steps on the way to where we need to be in technology. Let's not assume we can make that in one huge stride, because whatever we do that adopts safer ways of doing things, even if it is not perfection, it's going to be a lot better than it is today or was yesterday. So we've heard a huge amount of data, of ideas, of great practice, both here in North America and from other countries. And I come back to, this is all about people. I have a habit of using names. And I think of the incidents I've been involved with through my safety career, and I think of them with the victims by name. For me, that helps. For me, that makes it real. It's a person, it's not just a place. Because our habit is normally just to list accidents by the location, isn't it? So, Andy, my first fatality investigation was a father by the name of John who, through crass stupidity on his farm, killed his 3-year-old son, Guy Alexander. I'll avoid using the surname. I was on site that day and interviewed John about what he'd done in the accident that killed Guy. That'll stay with me forever. But actually, my way of dealing with it is I actually try to use names to bring it alive, to make it real, to make it more translatable to other people. I invite you, in relevant circumstances, absolutely not if the family don't want it, to also consider doing the same. This is about people, this is about lives, and together we can make a vast difference. So, by way of wrapping up, we've had a tremendous 2 days. The organisation of this event has surpassed all expectation from me. I know there was a lot of promise, but boy, have you exceeded it. I've been really sorry that for the last 2 years, we had the promise of a visit to York in England, and then with the pandemic had to make that an online event. And I hope at some time in the future, we can invite people from across the world, and particularly from here in North America, to come and get a taste of old York, not just new. Thank you.
Okay. We come at the end of the day, of 2 days of wonderful meetings, and also having met some wonderful people. Where am I? I didn't do anything. Okay, my title was ILCAD is a human and global adventure. For me, that's a motivation. Tamo knows it perfectly. When we started that adventure in 2009, in a group on level crossing safety, we decided to set up a global awareness campaign. Why? Because some countries around the table used to organize a national campaign. And we thought we have a Mother Day, Father Day. We could also have a day dedicated to level crossing safety. That's also thanks to TAMO that I discovered Operation Lifesaver. And that was a motivation for me too. I must say that at the very beginning, I was not quite supported by the railways. Some railways in Europe were thinking old-fashioned. Some said to me, why do we tackle that issue? The accidents, the collisions are caused by the road users. We do our best. We run our trains in total safety, and those people, they create collisions. So why should we talk to those people? And I was really astonished by that reaction. And I said, look, if you continue playing the ostrich, okay, you are going to continue to have collisions at every single safety platform meetings. We had presentations from different countries because many railways belong to our group in Europe. Every time we had about 4 to 5 presentations on level crossing safety accidents. We had also some presentations on trespassing and suicide. I say at the end of 4 or 5 meetings, I said, and you don't want to talk to it. You just want to talk within you, within your little railway club. Is it going to change anything? No. If you don't talk to other sectors, the road infrastructure, the road safety advocates, the road sector in general, some associations of victims or whatever, you won't do anything. And I know the situation in the UK, I know the situation in the USA, and I say to some colleagues, I'm not going to mention them, if you continue like this, you will have a big accident, and some people will go to court. That's going to happen. That's happened. So from that particular accident, I'm not going to mention because I don't want to make anyone bothered, the reaction of those people in the railways changed. And I've seen over a decade really a big, big change in the mentalities, in the reactions, in the way of targeting the audience. Now the locomotive is on, the train is on, the train is going on tracks. That's my motivation. And really, because it's human, I've met wonderful people everywhere in the world. And all those people, no matter their culture, their language, I speak several languages, it helps communicating. But really, even if you don't speak the language, we have the same issues. We have the same goals. And today, really, I'm going to stop with that. During the COVID-19, I looked for a motivation to work because I had to find a sense to my work. I was kind of fed up and I wanted to do something else, to engage myself in the Red Cross, whatever. And that's that particular subject that gave me the motivation to continue, to organize some conferences online because we could not do anything else. And I'd like to continue because you give me the motivation. I'm not working in the operation in the railways, but let's say the motivation of doing something that is helpful. I hope, seeing all our flyers being translated everywhere in 20, 25, 30 languages, that today, perhaps you don't know it, but today there are many people around the world who do something, who engage themselves, who talk to other sectors, to other people. And really, that's why I'm motivated again. Okay, go back to my presentation quickly, but I had to say it. Okay, some figures, some facts. So ILCAD is a worldwide level crossing safety campaign launched by an international conference. We celebrate the 14th edition this year, and in the campaign, usually 40 to 50 countries participate. We had the last physically conference in Holland in 2019. Some of you were there. It was a great success. Then we had to organize a conference in York. And because of COVID, it was postponed to 21. 21 again, it was we canceled it, but we organized an online conference. And this time, since everyone was, stuck at home or stuck in the office, I decided to organize it in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and French. And we had really a great success last year with 400 people. Usually, I organize a conference in a country and a parallel one in Spanish with our colleagues in Argentina. We organize some technical or social visits, as here today. I'm a little bit emotional. Okay, ILCAD logo exists in more than 30 languages now, so they are used globally. So you see here a very Western style conference, but there are smaller or greater conferences today in Mongolia, in Africa, anywhere. I remember this very successful conference in Zagreb, in Croatia, and I wanted to recognize Daniela, Sanja, I don't know where she is, and Martin. It was a great, great job. We were a small team. We succeeded to do something together. That was great. Some of you were here too. Huh? The last one was in 2017, the last one in person, in Amersfoort, in Holland. Barbara, you were here, Andy, Alan, Rob. The public targeted this year were vulnerable users. The slogan, don't put your life at risk, stay away from tracks. You can see on the website a whole list of countries participating. And we got a new one. Perhaps it's a small one for you, but it's important to me. In Congo, in Africa, and I read yesterday that Angola is doing something too. I've been receiving many emails today, many WhatsApp, many messengers, everything with some kind of reports, some photographs, some news on social media. So in South Africa, Mexico, Morocco, India, Greece, Cameroon, Mongolia, you have a chance to travel, even if you don't take a plane, you see. I'm going to show you the video that we have done this year for ILCAD 2022. Gathering some kind of risky behaviors. That was in the UK. That's in New Zealand. That's in Holland. An old one in the UK. That's in the Czech Republic. So you see 4 tracks, an old man, Okay, so we've made that montage of CCTV footage from different countries just to show risky behaviors. Those people were hit, but were not, or almost hit, but didn't die, okay? I didn't want to show any trash images. To counterbalance, we've made some posters with positive attitude, with children, with elderly people. As you see here on the right-hand side, you recognize the old man crossing the tracks in Belgium. And that guy really, we talked about drivers lately. The driver of the locomotive broke, he used the brakes, of course, and then he was convinced that he had run over the old guy. So he went to see underneath the locomotive because he thought that the guy was underneath. Well, he just disappeared. He was alive, but disappeared. So for the first time also, we made some posters also on trespassing risks. Those posters were translated in several languages. We share them with all the countries participating. If they want to have their own language with their own logo, we can make them for them. That's what we did. We wrote a joint press release with AAR, FRA, and OLI, and the UIC press release is taken partly or entirely by other countries to send to their journalists. Of course, we are published on social media. The UIC cooperates with other international organizations. We have a UIC working group on level crossing safety and trespass suicide prevention with 45 members from around the globe. I work with the UN, and in 2017, we had a working group and we published a report with recommendations. I've worked with FIA, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile, and also with the European Commission, European Railway Agency, the International Transport Union, and Operation Lifesaver. We have published guidelines for professional drivers in 2017, and also lately the International Road Federation, IRF, and OLE, and we published in December last year some guidelines, safety guidelines for motorbike drivers and car drivers. And that was a challenge. I wanted absolutely 3 new flyers before ILCAD. So we've worked again with OLE and International Road Federation to publish safety flyers for pedestrians, cyclists, and users of micro-mobility devices and persons with reduced mobility. They are available in several languages also. That's an example that I had just before leaving of the Irish Rail that today they had an awareness campaign with the police forces and also the Road Safety Authority. They used their usual cars that they customized to make the campaign today at specific level crossings. Okay, I would like to make a kind of quiz. I've been harassed by many people to know where is the next ILCAD. And I was tortured, I was threatened, but I said, no, I don't say anything. If you want to win the game, I accept credit cards, dollars, euros. You can put your money here. Otherwise, please flash the code, and there is a quiz to know to guess where is the next ILCAD. As soon as you are okay, I changed the slide. Tell me. So, the first ILCAD launch conference took place in Brussels at the European Commission building. I think Tamo was here. And again, the year after at the Commission, and also at Infrabel in Belgium. Then in Warsaw, then in Paris, then in Geneva at the United Nations, then in Lisbon, then in Istanbul, then in Riga and Tallinn. We went to see Tamo up there. We had a bad weather. Then we went in 2017 in Montreal, then in Zagreb in 2018, Amersfoort in 2019. We had an online conference instead of York in 2020, and again in 2021 online. Okay, so and this year, yeah, again, we can see each other. Denver. So guess, next country, next city. Who has ever been to those capital cities? Who has been to Brussels? Okay. To Warsaw. Can you call? Paris. Aha, I see. Geneva. Okay. Lisbon. Istanbul. Riga, Tallinn. Montreal. And of course, we are in the US. Zagreb. Holland. Amersfoort. Okay. So, online. Where is it? Okay. So, you are finished with the... Oh, no.
Regrettably, it did not show up.
I tested it yesterday. It worked. Okay, we continue. Too bad. Yeah, put money, please. I was sure it would be working. So I give you a hint. Okay. Denmark, Copenhagen. Hint number 2. What that? No, please. It's recorded. They are still making ILCAD right now, okay? I've received some press articles. So hint number 3. Germany. Where? So Denmark again. Helsinki. No one knows. Okay. Number 4. Aha. Da 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 da. Ah, would clap. Sorry, I would have given the results, but okay. Aha. So some of you will know. Shoot. Oh, shoot. Okay, so I have to read a message from her. I'm sorry not being with you today. Nevertheless, I'm happy to invite you to the ILCAD launch conference on June 8, 2023, preceded by a conference on trespassing and suicide prevention on June 7, and followed by a technical social visit on June 9 to So that's our colleague Cassia. I wanted her to be here. We could have, re-meet the stick, but we can't. So you're all welcome to Warsaw next year, okay? I promise, perhaps one day we do it in Paris again, okay? Or York. Good. Thank you so much. We have had 2 wonderful days. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate. We will publish the presentations and send you a link. Thank you so much.
All right, if you'll stick with me for just a few more minutes. Isabel, the truth is I knew all along. If you stick with me for just a few more minutes, with your permission, we may run a couple of minutes over. Anybody? Because there's another big meal coming up here later, so if you'll hang out. Cocktails, wonderful reception that we have coming up. So, we have a little bit of information that we want to pass on to you about tomorrow. We've talked about the first 2 days. They've been exceptional. Thank you all for all of your time and patience. But the next one trip tomorrow morning, we are going to board some special transportation. We have a slide there for the... I don't have a clicker. There we go. I would like to say special thanks to one of our huge supporters, big partners of the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railroad. The BNSF not only is a gold sponsor, but they are also donating to us the use of this wonderful train. This is the BNSF executive train. Yeah. If you've ever had the opportunity to travel by high-end rail, this is it. So we are very proud to take you tomorrow morning very early. I do regret that you are going to have to get up early and be at a certain spot, and we will then transport you by bus to board this train. And from that point on, we've got a wonderful day ahead of you. We're going to feed you on the train. We have a whole fleet of chefs that are going to be cooking for breakfast for us on the way down. We're going to roll into a very historic rail station that has been recently renovated, the Union Depot in Pueblo, Colorado. The trip is also going to be through some of the most beautiful Rocky Mountains that you've ever seen. We're going to take a wonderful trip tomorrow. But for the details, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jeff Muller, who will discuss some of the ever-changing issues that we're going to face tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Andy. Next slide, please. Okay, you've seen variations of this map before. And the first thing I want to point out is that big arrow there is pointing to an intersection that's also in your programs. There's nothing different there. The rest of the information on here is new, though. So tomorrow morning, we're going to board buses at that corner there of Wynkoop and 16th Street. The 16th Street Mall goes there. And we'll take a short ride over to the railroad yard and board the train. Now, the thing is that you've got to be there by 7:30. We have a schedule to keep, and we've got to roll. So we're going to a railroad yard, so, there's no option to Uber over there. Please, if you want to Uber to that corner there before 7:30, because at 7:30 we'll be pulling out. We've got 2 large buses, so we can handle everybody with ease. And we'll head over to the yard, and we'll go down to Pueblo and so on. Now, coming back, it's going to be a little late. Our scheduled arrival back is about 10:15 p.m. That's 22:15. Depending on what we do at Pueblo, we might leave a little earlier than our 7 o'clock scheduled departure, which would get us in a little bit earlier, but, plan on a late evening. The buses will pick us up from that rail yard, and they'll bring us back, first of all, to Union Station. You'll see the number 1, number 2, number 3 on the 16th Street Mall there. We've asked the buses to make a couple of stops in that area. The 16th Street Mall is closed to private vehicles. It's only for the buses. So we're not going to be going up the mall itself. We'll be 1 block away from it. Plus, the mall is under construction and closed close to Union Station. So take a look at those, 16 in Winwata, 16th and Market, 16 in Curtis, because many of you are staying in hotels in that area, and pick your stop. Note it now, figure it out now so that tomorrow you'll know which stop you want to get off on. We've got different drivers all the time, so I'm going to be doing a lot of work briefing them. I've sent them all kinds of information about our plans and so on, but kind of like I stayed at the RTD station yesterday, I don't want to assume anything, so I'm going to make sure that everything works properly. But, familiarize yourself with our travel plans tomorrow, and it'll make it a seamless trip for you as well. Obviously, you can get off. We may not get off right at Winwata Streets because earlier we were going to board the train down here, but this morning BNSF requested we relocate the boarding location of the train to up there. So with the one-way streets and all, it may not be identical, but you get the idea. We'll be stopping. The first stop will be near Union Station. That's where I'm going to be getting off because I'll be riding the A train back to the hotel. But then there's the other 2 stops there. So pick your best stop, and then you can make your own travel plans from there. And unfortunately, that'll be it for all of us at that moment. So I don't have any plans to acknowledge how wonderful you've all been and all that. Does anybody, or do we just go back to Patrick Sherry now? I don't know. I'll give it back to our chairman.
When in doubt, hand me the microphone. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff has done an amazing job. He stayed out yesterday coordinating our transportation. He has personally been on the phone, on the emails, back and forth to make sure that this comes off in a timely manner. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not real familiar with the Denver transportation system, but I'm in a hotel near here, not down there. Can I park a car in there, or do I need to try to park?
There is parking in that area. Parking lot near Union Station. Walk over again, please. There is construction downtown. Leave early. Okay, so we want you there, grouped up and ready to go, because the train will leave the station. We have track rights at certain times. Well, at the end of every production, they have what they call a curtain call. And that's where the stars actually get to step out on stage and take a bow. Today, I'm going to ask a few stars to come up. I would start with the vice chairman of the 2022 ILCAD, Ms. Rachel Mala. I would ask the secretary of the 2022 ILCAD, Dr. Karen Philbrick. Our UIC partner, Ms. Isabel Fomburn. Ms. Barbara Barr, FRA. Ms. Star Kidda, FRA. Mr. Jeff Mahler, the AAR. He's very shy. During the course of the last 3 years, there has been a core group. The core group that has done the work that led to the food, that led to the organization, that led to the trains, that led to everything. There's also been one more person that has been the person behind the people. Miss Wendy, would you come up, please? Yeah. You have seen Wendy every day the last 2 days running around doing everything. I cannot imagine how much value Wendy added to this event. And Wendy is with Operation Lifesaver. She has been with OLI for 23 years. Ladies and gentlemen, for the curtain call today, this is the core of your 2022 ILCAD, Denver, Pueblo, USA. We would like to take just a minute. Not done yet. We would like to take just a minute to recognize all of our other partners that participated this year. Would you stand up with us? Come on. All of our other partners that help organize, that help work, that help do. The reason I have these folks up on stage, there were so many people working behind the scenes, so many different groups with the FRA, with the AAR, finance committees. I couldn't possibly name everybody, but this is our core group that started from the beginning. And ladies and gentlemen, you have my thanks. All right, one more presentation, and I'll turn the mic over to Ms. Rachel Mala for that.
Great, thank you. I also just want to add that all of us here have staff behind us who you have seen running around or created the flyers, the programs, the posters, the PowerPoint presentations, the maps that you've all seen. So it's not just us that have worked. So thank you to all of them as well. But while this is a week that we helped put together, every day, as we all know, we have to get the rail safety message out. And there are two people that help us do that on an international level. One of them is Alan Spence. Where's Alan? Alan? We have a gift for you, Alan, because we don't like people to go home hungry. So this basket, thank you. This basket is full of treats from Denver and Colorado as a momentum of our thanks and your visit here to the United States and specifically to Denver, Colorado. So thank you, Alan, for your leadership. And then
I'm a basket coach.
And then none of this, none of the conference calls, none of the virtual conferences, none of it would be possible without Isabel's leadership. So thank you so much, Isabel.
Darn right. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And with that, I think we're going to the reception. If
Wait, can I say something?
Sure, Barbara, I'm sorry.
Well, you know, I'm a ham for the microphone. But I think, with all conscience, I can't not say this. Of all the people on this stage, we're very dedicated to being in these meetings. I think it shows in everything we do. But I want to do an extra shout out to our chairman and our leader of our group, Mr. Andy Elkins. Andy's been our leader. A lot of us were shy. Who's going to lead this group? Because we all like to do a few little things, but we don't want to do everything. And Andy stepped up, and he's been the cheerleader and the help and the organizer and the decision maker on many things that were difficult. So a big shout out to Andy for all your help and support for our group. Thank you.
And Dr. Sherry? So our reception this evening is in the garden outside.
Well, I want to thank you all for choosing Denver as your location for your conference, and I hope you all had a wonderful day, learned a lot, and got a lot out of it. So in preparation for our reception, I think it's important that we do some basic training in order to be able to get there. So if you'd all take your right arm and stretch it out like this and touch your nose with it, and if you do that like 2 or 3 times, you'll all be limbered up for the reception that we're about to engage in across the way here. And so now, you know, this is an elbow exercise, so that's it. You've got it. You've got it there. All right, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go out the door. We're going to turn right, then we're going to turn right again, and we're going to walk along the little pathway. I will lead you. I know I'm short, but you'll be able to see me. I'll have a black backpack on, a black backpack, and you can follow me over to the reception. So, good food, good wine, good beer, I'm told, and we'll make just 1 or 2 short, very, very short remarks when we get over there. But other than that, that's it.
Thank you so much.
Let's go.
And now, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Thank you very much.
So moved. All in favor. Thank you all. We'll see you at the reception.
No, I've worked out the logistics.
Yes.